Whatnot made some big waves in the sports card industry last week when they announced their new professionally sealed surprised products policy aimed at cleaning up repacks. Repacks are a big business on Whatnot, but Whatnot said it is time to make them more transparent and more fair for the consumer. So they put a bunch of new rules in place for those manufacturing and selling repacks on their platform. These changes have been met with a lot of positive consumer feedback, but also some sellers who have called them into question, who said that maybe these changes are aimed at only supporting the big sellers on Whatnot and they're not helping out the smaller sellers. And others have said, how will these rules actually be enforced? And will this really make things more transparent and fair? So we decided to go straight to the source. We are bringing in Eric Shemtov, one of the executives at Whatnot, to answer all of the questions that I have about this new policy and help clear things up for you. What does this mean? How does this affect the industry as a whole? And could this be the start of more changes Whatnot may put in place to continue to make the platform more fair for all? We're going to ask him some tough questions now. The Jeff Wilson Show is brought to you by Arena Club, the official home of slab packs. Now available every day, slab packs offer an exciting way to collect graded cards with confidence. Plus, every pack comes with an instant offer to buy your slab. Don't miss out. Explore the latest slab packs and more by downloading the Arena Club app. Just search Arena Club in your app store and use promo code SCI20 for 20% off your first purchase. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Geoff, for having me.
Absolutely. So big things happening at Whatnot. Big news. I think you caused quite the stir last week when you announced about this policy change, the professionally sealed surprise products policy change. Tell me more about what this policy change actually means and does.
Yeah, so maybe let's talk a bit about what these products are first to make sure we're on the same page. Factory sealed surprise products, commonly known as repacks in the hobby. Those are products sealed by a manufacturer where neither the buyer nor the seller knows the exact contents of any specific package. And so that's predominantly what this policy is around that we rolled out. As I'm sure you've seen, Geoff, like being at the National and over the last year and change, there's definitely been an increase in prevalence of these products. This is actually a policy that we've been working on since the top of the year. It is quite a complex one, so it takes a bit of time to put something like this together and push it out into the market. And really, Whatnot, we take our role in the hobby seriously. We want to ensure that Whatnot is a trustworthy place for the community. And so that's part of why we're rolling out this policy and putting some policies in place specifically around what can be sold on the platform. We announced this, I believe it was last week on the 1st. And there's three critical components for manufacturers. The first is they have to file an application that primarily is vetting trust signals around their business and their business's history. The second is they need to pass a independent physical audit of the operation. And that's really in place to ensure there's sound and trustworthy operational procedures. And then the last one is to publish a publicly available checklist for each of the products. That's at the series level, which happy to talk about. And that gives buyers more transparency into what they're purchasing. And really what this does in more holistically is provides clear, consistent, and reliable product information so that as you engage with these products across the platform, you're able to rely on a consistent set of information, to make an informed decision around, is that a product that you are interested in or not?
Okay. And do these new rules apply to all types of like surprise products on Whatnot, like even the people who kind of make their own, homemade mystery packs using, bubble mailers and putting individual cards inside of them? Does it apply to all of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have two separate policies. The first policy is our surprise set policy that looks a bit more like what you're referring to, where folks are putting together a product and selling it on Whatnot. The main difference there is that has a built-in checklist when it is being sold, and all of those products must be sold in a single stream or show. And so slightly differing set of requirements and is different to what we're referring to here around the factory sealed side of things. We rolled a updated policy around that first set of products in the last handful of months, and that is unchanged with this new rollout. This one is primarily focused on the factory sealed or the repack side of things.
Okay. Which I assume is the bigger revenue part here, right? Because you're talking about, I imagine, breakers. You've got a lot of the larger breakers on your platform lean heavily into repacks. And so I imagine it's those larger streams, the larger breakers, the larger transactions that are probably being affected by this new policy. Is that accurate?
So that first set of products that I was just referring to, surprise sets, those cannot be sold in a breaks format. That is purely like an auction buy it now experience within a given show. What we're mainly talking about here around the factory seal and the repack side, that is where you see more breaking. And there's, a variety of different formats, of course, like across Whatnot. But those are the two separate policies, if you will.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Why now? Like, why? Obviously, breaking's been popular, or repacks, I should say, and mystery products and all of this have been popular on Whatnot for quite some time. It seems like the popularity of them has been growing. But why here in October 2025 did you guys say now's the moment, when we need to roll this new policy out and kind of make a pretty significant change for a lot of our sellers on the platform?
For sure. So I touched on this at the top. This is something that we've been working on for an extended period of time. And when we make or look to make decisions like this and roll out policies, there are a handful of different things, of course, to consider. One is what is fair for the community, both buyers and sellers. And so trying to give folks the right level of information so that they can make a decision for their business, having a period of time where they can adapt to that change because we have a lot of folks that are running full-time businesses on Whatnot, and changes like this can potentially be, a larger or more complex change to adapt to. The other component is what does it look like to put something like this together? And so the audit side of things, the checklists, what does enforcement look like when folks are not following this? And so all of those things are moving parts that when we bring something to market, we obviously have to make sure we are ready, and we're giving folks a period of time to adapt. Getting to the second part of the question of why now, I think that what we see as a platform is the community is always evolving, and our role is to see around the corners of what is new and what is happening, and how do we ensure that Whatnot continues to be a trustworthy place for the hobby and broader communities, and is a go-to place where you can transact in a variety of different ways. And so this is not something that is unique to sports cards specifically. Like, we do this across the platform. Trust is something that we built Whatnot on and have been investing in since day one. And so, it felt like the right time with where we are and our rollout, and here we are.
Okay. I, this policy change is affecting a lot of sellers today, in part because the popularity of repacks and breakers, opening up and breaking repacks really seems to have grown substantially over the last few years. I remember going onto Whatnot a few years ago. And if you went into a lot of the different break streams, most of the breakers were opening up Topps or Panini products. Fast forward to today, and it seems like a lot of breakers are spending a lot of time on their streams opening up repacks. It feels like the pendulum has swung a bit from manufacturers' products, over to repack products. Do you think it swung too far? And do you think that this move might actually, kind of make the manufacturers' products, the Topps and Panini products, a little more popular on the platform again?
I think the hobby is always evolving, and there are always trends, as you know, Geoff, whether it's basketball being hot or given players being hot or not, and equally on the platform, we see these things ebb and flow. Actually, one of the segments that I'm really excited about right now on Whatnot is singles, and we're seeing a lot of excitement on that side, and so. I think more broadly in the hobby, that's kind of how people interact and transact, where there are different cycles, of course, and so on. On Whatnot specifically, we have a whole host of sellers and content, of course, and so there is the variety of different products and formats, and offering folks different ways to engage with what they are most excited about. And so this is, of course, a change, and manufacturers and sellers and consumers will, of course, adapt to that and what we are putting in place. But I view it very similar to what we see on a daily and monthly and yearly basis, and how trends shift and change.
Do you think less sellers will sell repacks on the platform going forward because they haven't gone through the necessary steps, to go through this process now of getting the certification?
So the process, there is a level of complexity to it. And it's not just our process that is complex, like downstream, the manufacturing of these products, which I'm obviously not an expert in, is not. It's not that straightforward, right? And so there is a bar around what can be done and what can be sold on Whatnot. And so, again, similar to what I just mentioned, I think the community will adapt and sellers will adapt. Ultimately, there are broader changes in the hobby, right? With licenses shifting, with new products coming back into the market, sports being hot or cold specifically. And so I think equal to all of those things, I think folks will adapt and evolve how they run their business for, what is best fit for them and their specific community.
When we set up graded grails with a PSA certification, that was something brand new that PSA had never done before, right? We went to them with the idea. It took a long time. It took a long time to get how the process was going to work down. It took a long time for PSA on their end to figure out how they were going to really be able to offer their certification and work with our team and get the products put together, and randomized and the checklists published. And I mean, there are a lot of logistics to it to work out. Do you think that there is the juice worth the squeeze for a lot of the sellers of these products today? Or do you think that some, may just say, hey, the juice isn't worth the squeeze if I have to go through all of this. And then what do they divert to? Do they divert to doing singles? Do they divert to doing other, manufacturers products on the platform?
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify maybe one note. There's three parties, if you will, in this transaction. There's one is the manufacturer. And so the manufacturer is actually creating and curating these products. That is the party that would go through the application process, be vetted, go through the audit process, and then need to publish a checklist. The seller, in this case, the Whatnot seller, is a second party, and they are in the market acquiring that product that I was just referring to, similar to how they would acquire other product that they would make available for sale in their shows. And then the third is, of course, the consumer. And so each of these parties, in somewhat different ways, is impacted by this. But speaking specifically about the seller or the Whatnot seller in this case, I do think folks will adapt their operations to what is feasible for them. And so, whether it is a product, Geoff, like graded grails you put out into market or other PSA products or other products that go through this process, they will make their way onto a permitted products list or identified products list that is publicly available on a policy page on Whatnot of these are the things that can be sold in this format. And sellers can then understand what products can they make available in their shows. And again, similar to how they would evaluate other products, whether it's from a Tops or a Panini, an Upper Deck, or otherwise, or going into the market and buying singles to make available in their shows. That is kind of a decision point for each seller around how they want to conduct their business and what is best fit for them in their community.
But a lot of sellers today, not all, but some have relationships with the repack manufacturer. I mean, some of the repack, manufacturing is a spinoff, from the seller or something of that nature, right? So, I mean, in those cases, I guess it's the manufacturing side that putting the repacks together that's now got to figure out how to go get the certification and go through the approval process and get on the approved list. That's what you're saying, right?
Exactly. And so that is precisely where these like three steps I referred to come into play. Like that is the manufacturer's responsibility. Part of this is that there has to be a clear separation between the manufacturer of the product and the seller. The seller cannot have any non-public information around that product. And that checklist is the critical point, right? Because that checklist is available to a viewer or a consumer. It's also available to the seller. And then that is, what that step 1 and 2 of the process are validating. There has to be like clear SOPs in place around that checklist, general manufacturing criteria, and so on. And so operations will need to be separate, to your point, and then folks that want their product to be available for sale on Whatnot will need to go through this process. If they make it through every one of those steps, then they can be identified in that policy page that I was referring to.
So one of the criticisms I've heard of the policy change so far has mainly come from sellers on the platform who feel like they may not have the resources to go through to separate out manufacturing and to then go through, this type of process for getting the approvals. I guess what you're saying, if I'm reading between the lines here, is sellers who want to continue to do repacks but may not have the resources to have a separate manufacturing arm that goes through all of this, they could align with a different repack manufacturer who does take these steps and does become one of your approved manufacturers. And so then maybe there's some wholesale relationships that need to be formed where sellers are wholesaling from manufacturers who have gone through these types of processes.
Yeah. So taking one step back, we have a whole host of policies around the platform. And going into the help center about Whatnot, you can see many different links to different policies. This is one segment or slice of it. And there are like seller specific guidelines, buyer specific guidelines. Anyone can go in and view those things. And so on that page, there will be this identified products list. And as products are added and permitted to be sold, folks can understand, hey, is this something that can be made available for sale on Whatnot? Sellers can also use that information, of course, to understand what they can make available in their shows. And so that's kind of I think the like critical point. And what we're trying to do as a part of announcing this is giving folks the information, right, to understand how will they adapt or potentially change their business, what they are selling, what they are offering their community. And ultimately, I view that in a very similar light to how folks adapt, not just to changes on Whatnot, but to changes in trends in the hobby.
Sure. And there is a lot of changes in the hobby. Like, I mean, obviously as you mentioned earlier in the show, we are currently seeing a shift in licensing from Panini to Tops on basketball. That's a big shift for a lot of breakers. Some breakers have deep, long-standing relationships with Panini. Others have deep, long-standing relationships with Topps. Some have long-standing relationships with both. Some have relationships with neither, and they're acquiring product from other sources. But this is, I guess, another type of shift, a little bit of a different shift, but it's another type of shift for breakers to have to adapt to. Have you had to sell this policy have you had skeptical Whatnot sellers saying, Eric, why are you doing this to us? You're making our lives more difficult. Have you had to kind of sell the benefits of this to anybody at this point?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I think generally speaking, around sentiment, this has been out in the market for about a week now, and so I've seen different ebbs and flows. And Geoff, I know you've commented on some of it as well. And generally speaking, I think as actors in the hobby or folks that take part in it, all of us have a vested interest in helping to up level and raise the bar. And so I think there is that equal understanding, generally speaking, around change. Change is change. It's always met, with mixed feelings, of course. But generally speaking, I think that folks will adapt and start jumping into, what does it mean for my business? What do I need to do? How do I figure this out so that there's not a disruption? And I think ultimately that's where it comes to, and that's the stage that we are already in, because folks are a part of the community, and Whatnot is a critical part of the hobby, and they want to be able to sell here. And so, looking to make the changes and to adapt.
Yeah. I'm a huge proponent of this. Obviously, when we did the graded grills product, I talked about how I felt like Repacks needed more transparency and they needed a third party to say that they were fair and honest. I just felt like that was something that had to happen. And it's just, there's too much temptation if, if it's not a arm's length relationship with a way of getting this certified. There's just too much temptation for the company that is on selling the product. If they have some type of inside information about the product, if they understand what hit is where, or if they understand, just if they have any type of inside information about the makeup of the product, it creates an unfair situation for consumers. And I think there's a lot of people on the Whatnot platform that have done it honestly and have done it fairly and have had consumers' best interests in mind. But I think that this policy helps ensure that everybody on the Whatnot platform is now, putting consumers first, because it's forcing everybody to have consumers' best interest in mind by taking these extra steps to ensure the fairness and the transparency of the product. So I think it's a great step forward for the industry. Do you hope that others follow suit? I mean, Whatnot is obviously the big player when it comes to this space, but there are repacks that are sold on other platforms. There's repacks that are sold in card shops like Cards HQ. Do you hope that this creates kind of a widespread change throughout the community and people point to Whatnot as the platform that took the first, necessary steps on a platform basis to make this type of change happen?
Yeah, I think ultimately we want to ensure that we remain at the forefront of anything that looks like this and around trust, because that is so critical to the community and to the platform. And so, as we develop policies, we want to support a fun experience, of course, but also a transparent and a trustworthy one. And so we've had similar policies in the past. You and I have talked about it before, our high value reimbursement policy, where if a buyer doesn't receive an item from a break, they don't just get a refund, they get the full market value compensation for it, because that is what we would all want to receive if we were impacted by something like that. And so, equally and similarly with a policy like this, of course, we are focused primarily on Whatnot and our platform and the hobby that is here. But I do think that generally, in terms of direction and how the community is adapting, I do think there is a good chance that we see similar things elsewhere in the market.
I hope we do. I hope it. I hope it sets a trend. I think it's. I think it's a positive thing overall. Some people are probably going to say, people who want to get around this, manufacturers who are creating these repacks, they can now just pay their buddy to, say they're certified or to do the audit or whatever. How do you ensure that the process is actually thorough so that the end product is truly what you're hoping it will be, which is, honest, fair, transparent, etc.?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I'm glad that you raised it. There is a set of permitted auditors for this, and they have an SOP for how they go about conducting their audit. They're, of course, independent and a third party, and their business is auditing, and so that is their expertise, and ultimately, it is at their discretion of has this manufacturer met the requirements that are needed. And so we discussed some of those requirements, around a different location, a different facility, a different team, a different entity, having a separation, having, no non-public information, and so on. And so that is a critical piece of kind of that three-step process that I mentioned to drive that level of accountability and then shared trust across the decision making around these products on the platform.
What about the checklist publishing? This is a feature of this that I love. I love the transparency of having a full checklist out there for everybody to see. How are you going to ensure that actually happens?
Yeah, so I actually would take one step back and think more broadly about our trust system on Whatnot. There's two separate legs to it, if you will. One is the proactive approach. We've been investing in our trust and risk team ever since I've been at Whatnot, since the beginning of Whatnot, and that's something that has evolved both from a team perspective, but also our product. And so the proactive approach leverages signals on the platform to understand if something is going awry or something is happening that should not be, right? And so equally, that is one leg of this. The other is reactive, where we have a feature, of course, directly in the app. Any user can go in and report another user. In this case, we're focusing specifically on sellers or products that are being sold. Every one of those reports is reviewed. While we don't publish or share the outcome of investigations, we obviously have a process around that to drive a level of accountability for those things. And one of those will be what you're referring to here, where there's potentially distrust that is happening. This is a high trust process, and so the list that I was referring to, the identified products list, if there is a product that is not meeting the criteria, part of that is to have that product removed. And so I think it's a pretty straightforward process on our end. We leverage each of these different awareness types of the proactive and the reactive. And then for the case that we're referring to here, we'll drive a level of accountability around the manufacturer and the seller side of things, similar to how we would handle other violations on the platform.
Okay, so if this goes into effect November 3rd. On November 4th, if there's some seller on there who's selling repacks, but they're not on the approved list, I guess, you may notice that, your trust and safety team may notice that, or you may start getting reports of that. And then at that point, and it sounds like an investigation launches, and then you guys, ultimately that probably results in some action against the seller, I would imagine.
Yeah. So of course, what you mentioned is the right track. Where once this is enforced, similar to other policies, there will be accountability that's driven around those reports, both proactively and reactively. But that's precisely how it works.
Right. Okay. Have you heard any feedback so far from either sellers on the platform or consumers that has surprised you?
Not specifically. I think it went as anticipated. As I mentioned, change is change, and it's always met with mixed perspectives, of course. But generally, I think that folks are viewing this as a positive for the hobby overall. And these products are just like any other product, are not for everyone. But I do think that this adds an additional level of trust and is helpful in the decision-making process for consumers if it is a product that they are interested in.
Yeah, I mean, if you go look at the social reaction, I feel like it's from the consumer standpoint, I feel like it's largely been positive. We've done, we've done a few different posts about it on Sports Card Investor, on my personal, and if you go read the comments, a lot of positive comments there. A lot of people saying it's great that Whatnot's doing this. This is needed. This is helpful. This is positive. This gives me more trust, which I assume is the type of reaction that you guys were hoping to see.
Ultimately, sellers are here to foster their community and build a business. And, on both sides of the market, I think there has been, positive reception around this. And similar to what I mentioned, folks are going into the mode of how does this impact my business and my community, and what steps do I need to take? But I generally agree with you that it is the right direction, and we've seen excitement around it. We've also seen folks that are going into that go mode of what do I need to do and how do I adapt to meet the deadlines and so on around the change.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, couple more questions. Um, I'm curious. There's been some say the industry in general, the hobby in general, needs regulation, and it's become so big now. Breaks are happening all the time on platforms like Whatnot. A lot of people, some people, I should say, maybe not a lot of people, but some people suggest it's time for regulation in the sports card hobby, and regulation, especially if you're dealing with any type of government regulation, brings with it, I would imagine, just a whole host of, challenges for businesses in the hobby to have to comply with. Do you feel like a move like this, which is really almost kind of self-policing, self-governance from the biggest platform in the hobby, do you feel like this type of move maybe heads off some of that need for outside regulation?
Yeah, so our policies, as I mentioned, are, far reaching around different things that happen on the platform or should not happen on the platform. And then, as I mentioned, we have a like trust and risk arm of the business that we've deeply invested in to help ensure that Whatnot, continues to be that trustworthy place for communities, not just the hobby, but also more broadly other categories that we are in. And so that is primarily what we are focused on. If there is any change, then obviously that is something that we would adapt to. And similar to what we're seeing here, we would expect sellers and the broader community to equally adapt to.
There's a growing movement, I would say, in the hobby towards responsible ripping, right? So people who say, like, people who say, hey, it's easy to get caught up in the hype and excitement of some of these breaks that happen and live streams and all that type of thing. And we need to encourage responsible consumer behavior so that, the customers in the hobby, whether they're walking into a hobby shop, and buying boxes from our showcases, or if they're going into a break on Whatnot and being part of a repack break or something of that nature. Do you see Whatnot doing more in the future? Do you want to see Whatnot do more in the future to encourage responsible ripping?
So the what we've been talking about here is, how do we make sure that Whatnot remains a trustworthy place around the evolution of, different products in different formats and so on. Ultimately, we want consumers to be able to make an informed decision around what they are purchasing, and that underpins the policy that, we've been discussing here. I think to your question, we understand that there may be different reasons why someone doesn't want to engage on Whatnot anymore, and they have the ability to remove their account from the platform just by logging in and taking an action. If there's something that's preventing them from doing that, that's something that our team can help with. And so I think as the community continues to adapt, we will, of course, evolve our policies and our product to move in lockstep with it.
Okay. Well, this is a big policy change for sure. It goes into effect November 3rd. Eric, anything else to let, customers or sellers out there know as they're preparing for this transition?
Yeah, I think the last piece that I would share is, talked a lot about the goal of this and what we've done and generally what the process looks like. The last flag that I would have is that, overall, what this is doing is ensuring that there's that clear, consistent, and reliable product information. That is something that is very helpful for the consumer, which is the viewer and the buyer, equally for the seller to understand, what they are selling in the product, and more broadly in the hobby, excited about this increased level of transparency and trust.
It's going to be great. I 100% agree. It's a great thing for consumers. The having the full checklist available is going to be a big time step up. And obviously the security of knowing that these approved products have gone through third party audits and all that type of thing. I think the whole thing is a very positive change, and will hopefully continue to enhance the consumer experience for those who are buying into breaks or buy into live selling, or just big fans of participating in these live streams in general.
I agree.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, Geoff.
Good to see you, Eric. Best of luck with the change, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.